Broadcasting under the night sky from the edge of an undisclosed jungle on the Gulf of Mexico, I'm Christopher Garetano, your voice in the night. For the next hour, allow me to be your guide into the bizarre unknown, the fantastic macabre, and together we'll journey to that borderland between fiction and reality, a place beyond all rational explanation. We are now off to the witch. Ideal and violence as a term, a very sad poetry. I made The Wild Bunch because I still believed in the Greek theory of catharsis, that by seeing this, we would be purged by pity and fear and get this out of our system. That's a quote from the mighty Sam Peckinpah, a filmmaker who was first narrowly labeled by movie critics as Bloody Sam for an eruption of brutal violence often portrayed in his groundbreaking style of subversive cinema. The quote refers to a reactive event of carnage that apparently occurred after a group of Nigerian soldiers experienced his 1969 picture, The Wild Bunch, during a civil war. According to accurate reports, Sam's movie emboldened the troops to commit the same high-intensity slaughter and self-sacrifice in reality that they saw on the screen. Witnesses said that the Nigerian soldiers wanted to die in battle like Pike Bishop, played by the late William Holden, who succumbs to a barbarous demise at the end of the picture. Peckinpah's masterpiece Western is about a gang of outlaw military-turned-thieves who profit from selling stolen goods to low-life generals and international weapons dealers. They later return to an oppressed Mexican village to rescue their friend Angel from a tyrannical warlord named General Mapache. All members of the bunch know they will most likely die, yet they proceed forward with their doomed rescue in one of the most violent scenes in movie history. Grenades explode through dirt, bullets crash through shattered bones, ruptured vital organs, blood volcanically jetting from mortally wounded human bodies tumbling limp, one after another. Peckinpah's classic slow-motion dance of death, hundreds of men murdered in waves as a hailstorm, firing 450 rounds per minute from Pike Bishop's M1917 Browning machine gun. Other movie makers have attempted to top that scene, but most often while never understanding its intentional subtext, depth, and emotional impact. The lack of insight of this crucial combination of elements, resulting in fleeting imitation, solidified as novelty. But there was a duality to Sam's personal opinion on his own responsibility and influence. When being interviewed on a BBC talk show, in one moment he expressed honest regret that his picture inspired any kind of violence, and another moment, Peckinpah was defensive and unapologetically frustrated with the accusations as he brazenly pointed out the real enemy.
Why does violence have such a point of intoxication? People, why do people structure their day on killing?
Well, if it has a point of intoxication, isn't it rather a dangerous thing to play within the cinema?
I don't make rules. I think it's more dangerous to watch them do it in the news. I cannot compete with the news.
What about this bandwagon that you have started willy-nilly? I mean, I'm sure you probably regret it as much as anybody else, but films have become increasingly violent over the last few years.
50 years ago, Sam Peckinpah, an intellectual, emotional artist, noticed what he strongly believed was and still is the genuine problem, and it's not the movies. Other than The Wild Bunch, Peckinpah's even more controversially macabre picture was 1971's Straw Dogs, a movie about an American pacifist mathematician played by Dustin Hoffman who flees the United States during the violent and tumultuous era of the 1960s, only to be confronted with the most horrific circumstances of sex and savagery in his wife's hometown, located in a remote Cornish countryside in southwest England. After an ambiguously depraved sexual assault on his wife by several hired handymen, Hoffman's character, David Sumner, is eventually forced to become the very thing he despises the most, a cold-blooded killer, resulting in graphic murders including splashing boiling oil in the attacker's eyes, beating another to death with a golf club, and luring another into a giant bear trap that crushes the neck of its victim. The once sheepish teacher, in an act of survival, exterminates several men who invade his life and home with the ultimate intent to kill him. Straw Dogs altogether challenged, offended, and thrilled moviegoers, and on its first theatrical run, amongst many other notable future movie makers including Quentin Tarantino, was a young and impressionable Jim VanBebber, who is tonight's guest. To me, Jim is just as significant as Sam Peckinpah, Quentin Tarantino, or any other great storyteller that has explored our violent world. Partially as a result of Peckinpah's influence during his formative years, VanBebber's work is some of the most honest, unique, and strikingly human portrayals of grisly carnage that I've ever seen in motion pictures. Tonight we'll hear his story and his perspective on ultraviolence in movies, and we'll return after this commercial break.
In 1968, George Romero reflected back at the world with his horror classic, Night of the Living Dead. Throughout 4 decades, from the rising dawn and on throughout land, he continued to inspire our nightmares. Now, 3 years after his death, George A. Romero returns from the grave with his final masterpiece, The Living Dead, a mammoth novel and his ultimate zombie epic. From Tor Books and co-authored by Daniel Krauss comes George A. Romero's The Living Dead. Find it wherever books are sold.
ABC Pictures presents Dustin Hoffman in Sam Peckinpah's Straw Dogs.
Most far-out film I've seen this year.
Experience.
I thought it was a fantastic movie.
Very violent.
You had to have it in there.
I was shocked. It was frightening.
I felt hatred because the last part really got to me.
Really exhausted, really drained.
Horror. It was an excellent movie.
That made me feel sort of sad.
Oh, I just dig violence in movies.
It's frightening.
It's the kind of film that builds until you practically double over in your seat.
Totally devastating.
Dustin Hoffman has outdone himself.
He really outdid himself.
The culmination of all the other roles he's played.
I couldn't believe that Hoffman could ever play a brutal role like that. He just totally stepped out of his element.
Sam Peckinpah, who uncaged the Wild Bunch, now unleashes Dustin Hoffman in Straw Dogs. Rated R. Under 17, not admitted without parent.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Welcome back to Off to the Witch. I'm your host, Christopher Garetano, and tonight we're talking about ultra-violence in cinema. Our special guest was first bitten by the desire to make motion pictures at a very early age. The in-common fare that mysteriously draws young people to aspire to look through a camera lens includes Ray Harryhausen's stop-motion fantasy epics like The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, universal horror movies, and classic silver-screen monster legends like King Kong. But at the very young age of 10 years old, Jim was not only exposed to the subtextually heavy films of Sam Peckinpah, but also the work of another provocative movie maker by the name of Wes Craven. Craven, who was later known for more popular horror movies like A Nightmare on Elm Street and Scream, first made his debut with the vicious 1972 response to the Vietnam War titled The Last House on the Left, a then modern retelling of a Norwegian folktale Ingmar Bergman film The Virgin Spring, about a band of psychotic criminals who ogreishly kill, rape, and senselessly eviscerate two teenage girls and end up taking refuge at the home of their loving parents. The parents later realize who's resting in their house, and much like in Straw Dogs, the once mild-mannered couple are driven to become as vicious as the human monsters that murdered their daughter. This grindhouse of cinematic slaughter transmuted Jim's young mind, and eventually it became the core subject matter that drove him as a movie maker. From flesh stabbing, mortally wounded, profusely bleeding knife fights, and hand-to-hand street combat in his 1988 revenge gang picture, Deadbeat at Dawn, to the real-life portrayals of true crime stories and murderer Ricky Casso in My Sweet Satan, and the infamous Charlie Manson in Jim's 1997 masterpiece, The Manson Family. Jim's films are as shocking and powerful as the seminal pictures he witnessed in his local Ohio movie theater as a child. But VanBebber's display of violence is most effective because of his storytelling abilities, his unique style, his honest understanding of human flaws and emotion, and his portrayal of good, bad, and very ugly are what truly makes his pictures worth the price of admission. Here's a quote from the late film critic historian Roger Ebert on Jim's masterpiece interpretation of the horrific crimes of the Manson family, and where Ebert, a critic who typically abhorred violent cinema to the point of prejudice, praised Jim's work for exactly what the filmmaker intended. Ebert said, "All of this will lead you to conclude that the Manson Family is a wretched film, but I'm not sure I would agree with you. It filled me with disgust and dismay, but I believe it was intended to. And in that sense, it was a success. It has an undeniable power and effect." So, here's my interview with Jim VanBebber.
I was born in a small town in Ohio, a nice little town called Greenville, Ohio, back in 1964. That's back when Greenville had two thriving cinemas, the Wayne Theater and the State Theater, that were both only a couple of blocks from my family's house. It was a magical time to be born. I wish I had been born maybe a couple of years earlier, but I still got to see the influence of the late 60s seep in even around Greenville, Ohio. I mean, you know, there was a head shop and, you know, everybody was wearing styles and all that stuff. And once I got about age 8, 9, the owners of the Wayne and the State Theater were letting me just come into anything, an R-rated film, no matter, because I was a son of Mr. VanBebber, who was a merchant on the main drag of Greenville, and the merchants all kind of helped each other. My dad was a jeweler. So they'd let me in, so I saw first runs of Dirty Harry, Packing Force, Frenzy, Straw Dogs, you know, from like about 1970 on.
Yeah, and those movies must have felt heavy for a child, you know, maybe even boring at times. Was there one movie in particular that really changed things for you?
Caught, at age 10, a midnight screening of Last House on the Left that really crunched my brain. I mean, just knowing that, you know, it's actors and it's effects and very exciting, et cetera, et cetera. But when I saw something as crude and, you didn't recognize any of the actors and just the the mean-spiritedness of fucking Last House on the Left. That fucked me up. So for about 2 days, I was walking around going, that filmmaker should be arrested. He shouldn't be allowed to do this, you know. And then after 3 days, I'm like, why the fuck am I still mad at this movie? That's impact. That movie had more impact on a first viewing than, you know, anything I'd seen. I started to think about that, and I was like, there's a genius here.
It's almost like there was a completely different collective consciousness of culture. You know, in your opinion, why were films so heavy in the 1970s?
Things were changing, you know, in the 70s, and violence just kept getting pushed. Violence, and sex. And it was very exciting. And it was, you know, and they were making very nihilistic films. Like after Easy Rider, it's like it was standard for your heroes to die at the end of the film, you know. You just had this nihilistic look, which I'm sure, you know, the Vietnam War was helping shape, you know, the viewpoint of the country and what they were taking in as entertainment.
Sure, and those films were deliberately subversive too.
Oh, absolutely. And I grew to appreciate that. And then, you know, add to that the soundtrack of everything on the radio and from, you know, the record stores was pretty much fucking incredible. My favorite era of music is from, you know, I'd say 67 to 74. And then, you know, it all changed very drastically. You know, I hated fucking disco. But then you got punk rock.
Why do you think it was that everything changed?
I don't know. Maybe it's just, you know, it's hard to maintain. I guess and after the war ended, I think everybody was just, they wanted to party, you know, and then cocaine came in and everybody wanted to disco dance, you know, and fucking everybody wanted to stop feeling so bad.
And what was it that compelled you to want to make movies? It's almost like this freedom that you had when being let into a theater. You know, with a very heavy movie like Last House on the Left, most kids aren't allowed to see that. And perhaps you were associating making them partially with, you know, this intoxicating sense of freedom that a kid is allowed to see this very adult, very heavy movie.
I just had a burning desire from as soon as I started watching films to make films. But I had, you know, I was like fucking 6, 7 or whatever. And my dad did have a Super 8 camera, but he was very possessive about it. And like I begged him to shoot. I'm like, Dad, I want to make a movie. Come on, you know, buy a couple cartridges of film and film my movie for me. You know, he humored me as far as shooting the opening titles. And the opening titles, I think it was called Return of the Werewolf or The Werewolf's Revenge or some shit. And I glued some crepe hair to my hand and I had title cards and I was changing the title cards with my hairy hand. And that like shot out the roll and that's as much as ever got filmed. So I got real mad at him for abandoning it and it's like, fuck it, you know. There's a camera store in town, and I got a paper route, started saving money, bought my own regular 8 movie camera, and I just basically fucking stole his projector. He had a dual Super 8, regular 8 projector. I just took that thing from him. Fuck you, man, you owe me this.
You were exposed to so many extremely violent movies as a kid. You know, even by today's standards, Last House on the Left is really heavy for most people. You know, they might not even sit through it. Were you compelled to imitate that style of filmmaking even as a kid? You know, at 10 years old, you wanted to make films. Did you have an interest in making a film like Last House on the Left, even from a kid's perspective?
I think I was holding off on the violence, the graphic violence of what was, you know, formulating me. I had seen a re-release. I forget what year it was. They re-released them, but a re-release of the 7th Voyage of Sinbad came around, and that film just blew me away. I mean, I was already a big fan of King Kong and Mighty Joe Young, Black Scorpion, etc. But to see that huge, you know, on the big screen, in color. Cyclops, the dragon, the fighting skeleton. And also, I saw Way of the Dragon, Bruce Lee's written and directed and starring in film, which was released over here as Return of the Dragon. And so after, my first 3 or 4 films, which were all little stop-motion epics about dinosaurs and what have you, then it started becoming more violent and more martial arts. And
you saw this in cinema, but I have a feeling you saw this in life at some point, where violence is very different than it is portrayed in most films. But in your movies, it's uncomfortable, it's vicious, it's very real. As magnificent as the fight scenes are coordinated and as fun and stylized as your movies can be at times, you know what violence is. And I'm trying to figure out, at what point did you realize it? Was it just inherent, or did you experience something? If you don't mind me asking.
No, I don't mind. That's a good question. Trying to think. I think probably, growing up, in the early 70s, kids weren't as coddled as they are today. And, we didn't have cell phones or computers, so you were out running around. Your parents would say, go blow the stink off, and you go out and disappear and not come home till night. So, I got in plenty of fights, and I realized pretty quickly that they don't work exactly, like you want them to, like you saw Bruce Lee do or Sean Connery punch out somebody. You realize that one punch won't knock somebody out, unless you're Mike Tyson and hit the button just right. And, I wrestled from 7th grade through high school, was captain of the team my senior year. And, I broke a couple guys' arms and this one guy's leg. And, they scream like you've never heard anybody fucking scream in your life. And, you realize there's the real thing's a lot more messy.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
You're listening to Off to the Witch from White Phosphorus Pictures, currently available on Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many more. It's also available on the official White Phosphorus Pictures YouTube channel at Garetano 7. Subscribe today, as our forthcoming YouTube show, White Phosphorus Presents, will premiere in early 2021, along with special screenings, short films, trailers, and behind the scenes of our new movie and TV projects. Go to YouTube now and subscribe to our channel at Garetano 7, that's Garetano 7, and visit our website at offtothewitch.com. What's art worth if it drains your life away? If your fire to create burns so strong that it roasts the very balance of your life, then what is it all worth? I needed a film that would lift me over that wall. It came to me like a specter crashing in from another dimension. Mayhem's what will catch their attention. Mayhem's what will sell tickets. South Texas Blues, the new graphic novel about the making of the most infamous motion picture of all time, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Visit southtexasblues.com and order your copy today.
It rests on 13 acres of earth, over the very center of hell. The last house on the left. Here's the first motion picture to offer, to the daring, a look into the final, maddening space between life and death. The last house on the left. Caution. To avoid fainting, keep repeating.
It's only a movie. Only a movie. Only a movie.
Sights and sounds far beyond anything you've tested. The last house on the left. Offered by Sean Cunningham Films Limited in color. Caution. To avoid fainting, keep repeating.
It's only a movie. Only a movie. Only a movie.
Take as much as you can.
Only a movie.
What do you think? Like, why is violence necessary in a motion picture?
I think, or a play or a story. I mean, before there were movies, go back to Homer, go back to Shakespeare. Titus Andronicus is one of the goriest splatterfests ever written. I think it's just a very engaging, dramatic device. And it's not like it's bullshit. I mean, it reflects life. I mean, we think we've evolved or, we're civilized, but human beings are incredibly violent and stupid. Even the best of us, we have our moments. You get pushed too far, you can snap. It's part of us. I mean, we're not divine creatures. When you're dealing with violence in a narrative, make it horrifying. I mean, you should make it so the audience isn't relishing it like, some sort of Schwarzenegger commando violence where it's fun. They should wince. It should hurt. And, after growing up watching the CBS television film of Helter Skelter, they show little glimpses of the murders. And I'm like, that doesn't get across how heinous these fucking things were. Let's put the audience right there and make them kind of wish that they didn't even want to know.
So honestly, for me, that's one of the elements that makes your film so striking and ultimately important, because the violence is ugly. And there's nothing attractive or hip about the Manson family in your movie or any other of your films that approaches violence. So in other words, your movies don't romance violence where a lot of other films do. Do you think your movies could prevent a violent crime from happening?
Well, you can only hope, you can only hope. But it's all up to the viewer. I don't think art really makes people violent or influences people. I mean, I think their desire to do whatever they're going to do is already there, and the film or novel or painting or whatever might set them off because that's already been rattling around in their fucking brains, and they're triggered. A lot of people are being triggered these days. That's what I think. I always say my argument is, okay, what movie did Jack the Ripper go binge watch before he decided to kill a bunch of prostitutes? Art is more of a reflection. I don't think it causes violence. I don't buy that argument.
So, and this is what I believe. So it's not your responsibility either way. You're an artist and you're speaking about something, and that's how it's received is how it's received.
Yeah, totally. Any artist, comedians, in this cancel culture, don't trigger me and don't joke about that and don't offend me. Comedians are out of work. And so, it's not just filmmakers. Artists, don't blame the artist, man. I don't think if you're an artist making an artistic statement, whether it's a painting, a novel, a movie, it's not your responsibility to worry about the audience and the way they're going to take it. Life's a much richer pageant for having art.
It seems like censorship is a bigger problem than the actual violence. And even now, it's not just organizations like the MPAA censoring films, we're censoring each other, which is causing more hostility than ever.
Yeah, in these days of cancel culture and tightening the grip on free speech and all the crap, that's when art suffers the most. It really does.
I know, with myself or anyone who's psychologically stable and is not so triggered by even the existence of something that bothers them, I can admit there are many movies that I love for just the thrill and the audacity of cinema violence or simulated violence. Like Paul Verhoeven's RoboCop, Sam Raimi's Evil Dead films, early George Romero films.
I guess one film I'm leaving out here that was certainly made me say that, violence in film is awesome is seeing Dawn of the Dead at age 13. And the beautiful thing about that was it ran for 2 months at the Wayne Theater at midnight. And I caught every show. That film, it's my favorite Romero film, and that blew me away. And I had to make my own regular rate epic on the Living Dead and try and replicate Savini effect and stuff.
Yeah, as did myself and many other filmmakers who were kids and saw those movies. There was always this misconception that we were excited about murder, and it was really about dangerous movie making. But it's the best filmmakers that try different genres, and I noticed that what's very exciting for me is your new movie is that it's actually about vintage 20th century sideshow attractions, particularly Jojo the dog-faced boy and stuff like that. Do you see this as a departure for you as you've had this steady series of movies about violent crimes?
Yeah, it's definitely a departure. It started out kind of as a joke. Maybe, the first couple of roles we shot, I think we were just like almost like a screen test. Like, can this work at all? Can Scott Gabby be Jojo the dog-faced boy? By its very nature, I mean, there's not a lot of murder and fighting and stuff in the story of Jojo or the 2 other circus attractions that I'll be covering in this film. But the last guy, it amps up in violence, but no, it's not the genre of Gator Green or Deadbeat at Dawn, and it's not the forensic violence of Manson. This will be the mildest film that I've made yet. Doesn't mean that the one after that will be mild. I wouldn't really care, if some, new fan at age 15 who thinks that my name is, or I'm Bloody Sam, is disappointed. That's okay. I think when you're a teenager and you're hooked on Wild Bunch and Killer Elite and Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, you look at something like Cable Hogue, the Ballad of Cable Hogue, and you're like, that's weak. But then you get into your 30s and you're like, wow, that's a really nice movie. It's really sweet little film there, Sam. Where'd that come from?
Yeah, Cable Hogue is a beautiful movie, and it wouldn't have hit me as a kid. It hits me, as a man in my 40s now. I can look at that movie and I can relate to, what Robards is experiencing and feeling to some extent. I look at that film as a grown man, and I can relate to a lot of the themes that are in it, and obviously that's what Peckinpah intended. There's so much more to his work than, any stuffy critics of the day labeled him as Bloody Sam. And I also feel the same about you. I'm excited to see your new work, man. I'm on board with anything that you do.
Thanks, brother.
I'm on board if you make a movie about flowers, tortoises, whatever, man. I'm down to see the next movie.
Yeah, I just wish everybody'd get vaccinated and the world could return to normal, because, I did a shoot in December, but that had been originally meant to happen like last March. And then, we got whammoed, and it was just, there's no way. And finally, people got comfortable enough with wearing masks and washing their fucking hands and whatever that they could move around. And we finally, shot what I was supposed to shoot in March and December. So I just want to, get back on schedule. And, now we're going into winter here in Ohio, so you can't really do fucking anything. So I'm looking probably at the spring, and then hopefully have it all shot by the fall and then post.
So I ask everybody who comes on the show the same question at the end. If we retain our consciousness after death, what would you take with you from this life?
I think I'd want to take, I think what humans do the best when the situation right is love each other. And I've gone through some great moments of loving others and others loving me. And I think that calm and that peace of mind that it sets you at, that would be about all I want to take away. The earth can keep the greed and the anger and the war and the jealousy and the pettiness and all the terrible things that go along with being a human being on this planet.
Welcome back to Off to the Witch. I hope you enjoyed my discussion with Jim. I have so much more that I could say about the subject of violence, and certainly more for all of us to learn about it. It's in all of my work as well, and will continue to be. It's part of life in cinema. It helps us understand and even deal with the real terror in this world. But the independent movie maker doesn't hide it from you. Nor do they try to covertly manipulate you with violence for a greater agenda. It's a subjective ingredient to storytelling and will affect each viewer differently, and that's all the movie maker is responsible for, to affect the audience. Like Sam Peckinpah suggested in the 1970s, the news is a greater cause of violence. Censorship of all kind is a greater cause of violence. The sensational, divisive mass gaslighting of politics on our people is a greater cause of violence. A vacant, uninspired, manufactured by committee television, movies, and music leads to violence, if not simply through monotonous boredom, much faster than any independent horror movie could. I say this because I believe that if portrayed in a proper way, with impact and consequence, violence in cinema can actually prevent it in real life. The movie makers who caused controversy with their violent pictures were often speaking to the world in subtext. So speak with your work, your art, music, motion pictures, say something. Now is the time to speak your poetry to the world. Make it brutal, intelligent, powerful. Fight the establishment and speak your mind with a great heart and passion. Our current society is tumultuous, if not more so than the 1960s. There's a lot at stake. Now's the perfect time for our commentary. Do not submit to the rules of corporate studio and political culture. Speak to the world and change the system before its walls of censorship close in on you so narrowly that you believe in its oppressive, soulless philosophy. Rage against the true violence of mind control and change the world. Make a statement with your work. I wish you all a good night and to live a free and beautiful life.